Welcome back. Today we're going somewhere that most outsiders never visit, most cameras never reach, and most maps don't bother to detail. If you enjoy exploring hidden stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth journeys. A city within a city, home to over 2 million people, built almost entirely without government involvement, planning permission, or official infrastructure of any kind. Orangi Town in Karachi, Pakistan is frequently cited as one of the largest informal settlements on Earth. Not a temporary camp, not a transit point. A permanent functioning multi-generational community that has been quietly building itself for over 4 decades. While the formal city around it largely looked the other way, the reputation is intimidating. Narrow alleyways, gang-controlled blocks, open sewers, and a density of human activity that makes even Karachi's chaotic main streets feel spacious by comparison. But 2 million people live here. They raise families, run businesses, build homes, and maintain communities that have survived everything the city has thrown at them. This is real life in Orangi. Let's go. Orangi Town, a city of over 2 million people. Karachi is already one of the largest cities on Earth, with a total population somewhere between 15 and 20 million people, depending on how you count. And sitting on its northwestern edge, sprawling across a series of low hills that nobody particularly wanted when migrants first began settling there in the late 1970s, is Orangi Town, a settlement so large it functions less like a neighborhood and more like an entirely separate city that happens to share a border with the one surrounding it. Population estimates for Orangi range between 1.5 and 2.5 million people. These are figures that are genuinely difficult to pin down because much of the settlement exists outside formal registration systems. People arrive, build, and establish households without paperwork trails that make counting straightforward. What satellite imagery consistently confirms is that Orangi covers thousands of hectares of dense residential and commercial construction, placing it among the largest informal urban settlements anywhere in the world. Growth here has been entirely demand-driven. Waves of migration into Karachi from rural Sindh, from Punjab, from Afghanistan following the Soviet invasion, brought people who needed somewhere affordable to live in a city where formal housing was completely out of reach financially. Orangi absorbed them one household at a time, expanding outward across 4 decades without a master plan, without a development authority, and without anyone in official capacity making deliberate decisions about what was being built. The result is a settlement whose scale only becomes truly visible from above, an unbroken expanse of rooftops stretching further than the eye can follow. Life without urban planning. The most immediately striking physical characteristic of Orangi is the narrowness of everything. Streets serving as primary routes for entire neighborhoods are wide enough for a single motorbike or 2 pedestrians walking carefully, not both simultaneously. Vehicles larger than a rickshaw simply cannot access most interior areas, meaning everything moving deeper into the settlement travels on 2 wheels or on foot. Above head height, the situation is more chaotic still. Electrical wiring in Orangi represents decades of accumulated individual connections, illegal grid taps, and repairs layered on previous repairs until the cable bundles strung between buildings in some areas are thick enough to block significant portions of sky. Power outages are frequent, connections unstable, and the fire risk from deteriorating insulation packed tightly between buildings is something residents live alongside as a permanent background condition rather than a problem anyone has systematically addressed. Green space is essentially absent. There are no parks, no planted areas, and no open space of any meaningful size within the residential fabric. If you find these insights valuable, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories on urban innovation. Children play in streets because, well, streets are the only outdoor space available. This creates a constant negotiation between pedestrians, playing children, parked motorbikes, and handcarts moving goods through lanes never designed for any of them. Population density in the most congested sections reaches levels comparable to the most crowded urban environments recorded anywhere globally. That physical reality shapes everything. It affects how long movement between 2 points takes, how illness spreads when it enters a neighborhood, and how noise and heat accumulate in spaces where air barely circulates between walls, built close enough to touch simultaneously from both sides. The people who built their own city. What makes Orangi genuinely remarkable, and what has drawn researchers and urban planners from institutions all over the world, isn't simply that it exists at this scale without official support. It's that residents actively organized to build the infrastructure government never provided, and did so with practical effectiveness that formal development programs have, repeatedly failed to match. The most documented example is the Orangi Pilot Project, which was initiated in the early 1980s by Pakistani social scientist Akar Hamid Khan. Orangi had no sewage system. Waste moved through open street channels, creating predictable disease conditions. Government proposals for conventional sewage had been costed beyond any available budget. Khan's approach was different. Work directly with residents to design and build their own underground sanitation infrastructure using simple technology, locally purchased materials, and community labor organized street by street. Over subsequent decades, residents constructed tens of thousands of sanitary latrines connected to an underground sewage network spanning hundreds of kilometers, built and financed by the community rather than by government. The project became a standard reference in international development literature, demonstrating that communities excluded from formal urban systems can build solutions exceeding official program outcomes when given technical frameworks rather than top-down infrastructure delivery. Roads, electrical connections, and water supply have followed similar patterns, with residents identifying needs, pooling whatever resources are available, and building solutions without waiting for authorities who have consistently under-delivered relative to what a settlement of this population would require. It is by any reasonable measure one of the most significant examples of community-led urban development recorded anywhere in the modern world. The world of home workshops. Orangi's economy runs almost entirely on informal manufacturing, and honestly, the scale of what gets produced inside its residential lanes would surprise anyone who assumes poverty and productivity are opposites. Walk through almost any block and, the sounds give it away before the visuals do. Sewing machines running behind half-open doors, hammering from small metal work operations, the chemical smell of leather being processed in rooms that double as living quarters after working hours end. Garment production is among the most widespread activities, with small workshops stitching clothing for suppliers who feed into Karachi's larger textile export industry. Shoes, bags, and leather goods follow similar patterns, produced in family-run operations using equipment that, honestly, costs more than the average household earns in several months and represents the family's most significant capital asset. Plastic and metal recycling operations sort, clean, and process material collected from across Karachi, feeding it back into manufacturing supply chains at prices that make the economics work despite the labor intensity involved. If you find these insights valuable, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Electronic waste dismantling, pulling reusable components from discarded devices, occupies another section of this informal industrial ecosystem. What holds all of it together is the absence of overhead that formal businesses carry. No commercial rent, no registered employment costs, no regulatory compliance expenses. Production happens where people sleep, eat, and raise children, eliminating the separation between work and home that formal economies treat as standard. The result is an economic engine that operates below every official radar, while sustaining millions of people who have no realistic access to the formal employment market surrounding them. Children growing up between poverty and hope. The children of Orangi grow up in an environment that makes ordinary childhood milestones, well, anything but ordinary. A safe place to play, uninterrupted years of schooling, freedom from economic pressure. These are genuinely difficult to achieve rather than simply assumed. The streets serve as playgrounds because, honestly, nothing else exists, so childhood play happens in the same lanes as motorbike traffic, market activity, and whatever else the neighborhood produces on a given day. School attendance rates in Orangi are lower than Karachi averages that are themselves lower than national targets. The gap between enrollment and consistent attendance is, really significant. Children start school, then economic pressure pulls them out. A father's illness, a family debt, a younger sibling needing supervision while parents work. Any of these can end a child's education permanently rather than temporarily, because once out, the path back rarely materializes. Child labor in Orangi tends to be visible rather than hidden. Boys working in workshops, carrying loads at markets, or assisting in recycling operations are part of the neighborhood's daily visual texture, rather than something occurring behind closed doors. Families making these decisions are generally not indifferent to education. They're making rational calculations under conditions that leave few genuinely good options available. What persists alongside this is something harder to quantify: ambition. Teachers working in Orangi schools, both government and the numerous low-cost private schools that have proliferated across the settlement, consistently describe students who understand clearly that education represents their most realistic path toward a different kind of life than the one surrounding them. Alleyways that change after dark. Orangi's reputation for danger is not invented. Certain areas of the settlement have genuine histories of gang activity, violent crime, and drug distribution that have shaped both media coverage and, honestly, the daily calculations of residents navigating the neighborhood. But the reputation is also not uniformly applied across a settlement the size of a mid-sized city, and treating Orangi as monolithically dangerous misrepresents a place where, the vast majority of streets are ordinary residential lanes rather than active conflict zones. Gang presence in Orangi historically followed ethnic and political lines that reflected the broader tensions of Karachi's politics during the 1980s and 1990s. These were periods when the city experienced significant political violence that touched Orangi as intensely as ever. Specific blocks and lanes became associated with particular groups, and local residents developed a navigational knowledge of which areas to avoid, which routes to take after dark, and which social protocols to observe when moving through territory where informal power structures operated more visibly than police presence. If you're interested in more stories from inside Karachi's communities, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for updates. Drug distribution networks operate within parts of the settlement, which residents discuss with the matter-of-fact pragmatism of people who have learned to live around a problem that external authorities haven't solved, and that they lack the power to eliminate independently. After dark, the behavioral map of the neighborhood changes noticeably. Streets that carry significant pedestrian traffic during daylight hours empty earlier than comparable areas in more affluent parts of Karachi, and the unspoken rules governing movement become more strictly observed by residents who understand precisely where the boundaries are, even when no signs mark them. Women in the slum. Women in Orangi occupy a world that is in many cases geographically very small. For a significant proportion of the settlement's female population, daily life moves between the home, the immediate street, and the nearest market. It's a radius that might cover 200 or 300 meters, and within that space, most practical needs are met, most social relationships are maintained, and most economic activity is conducted. Home-based work is the dominant female employment pattern. Garment stitching, bead and embroidery work, food preparation for sale, and childcare arrangements for neighbors who work outside the home all generate income without requiring women to leave the immediate residential area. It's an arrangement that satisfies both practical economic needs and the social expectations around female movement that operate with real force in conservative Pakistani communities. Marriage pressure arrives early for many young women in Orangi, with family expectations around the appropriate age for marriage that, differ significantly from urban Pakistani middle-class norms and even further from international standards. Economic considerations shape these timelines in both directions. A daughter's marriage reduces household expenses, while bride price or dowry arrangements can represent significant financial transactions for families operating on minimal margins. What's easy to overlook from outside is the degree to which women function as the organizational backbone of community life within Orangi. Neighborhood mutual aid networks, rotating savings arrangements, information sharing about available work or resources. These systems run primarily through female social networks that operate quietly and without formal recognition, but honestly, they represent genuine social infrastructure, holding communities together across generations of difficult circumstances. Orangi Market. Everything available, nothing expensive. The market areas running through Orangi's main accessible streets represent one of the settlement's most energetic environments, a density of commercial activity that begins before sunrise and doesn't fully quiet until well after dark, serving a captive population of millions who do most of their purchasing within the settlement, rather than traveling to Karachi's more distant commercial centers. Food markets dominate the morning hours. Vegetables, fruit, lentils, rice, and fresh meat arrive from Karachi's wholesale markets and are sold from open stalls at prices calibrated to genuinely low purchasing power. The margins are thin, the volumes are high, and the competition between adjacent vendors is immediate enough to keep prices honest.